The art of silent influence, covert persuasion to help you sleep. It's late, isn't it? You're here because something in you is quietly restless, searching for permission to let go, but never quite finding it. Tonight, I want you to imagine that there are invisible strings tied delicately to your thoughts, pulled by hands you barely notice. Not just your own hands, but a silent orchestra of expectations, memories and voices you've picked up along the way. Maybe you think of persuasion as something that happens in a crowded room or across a negotiation table. But the truth is, most persuasion happens in private, between you and the version of yourself that appears when the world goes dark. That's when the mind begins to whisper its bargains, offering trade after trade for just a moment of peace. In those hours, the rules of influence don't vanish. They simply go underground. Robert Cialdini described persuasion as the art of invisible agreement, built on small, almost invisible exchanges. His principles, reciprocity, scarcity, authority, consistency, liking, consensus, aren't just for marketers or politicians. They shape the conversations you have with yourself, especially when you're most vulnerable. Think about it. How many times have you tried to trick your mind into sleep by bargaining? If I just lie still for 10 more minutes, maybe I'll drift off. If I finish this thought, maybe then I can rest. There's a quiet negotiation playing out in your head, one that feels private, but is written with language you've inherited, not invented. There is a certain irony in trying to control the uncontrollable. The more we attempt to will ourselves into sleep, the more wakeful we become. It's the paradox of surrender. You cannot persuade yourself to let go by force, only by invitation. The urge for control spikes at night. The darkness isn't empty. It's a canvas for all the doubts and unfinished stories you've carried with you. Sometimes it feels like your own face becomes a stranger's mask. Paul Ekman, who spent his life decoding the language of micro-expressions, once said that the face leaks what the mind tries to hide. In the quiet of your bedroom, your jaw clenches, your brow tightens, your breath stutters, little betrayals of effort, tiny protests against the act of surrender. Even alone, you perform for an audience of one, yourself. But you aren't just struggling with your own expectations. Every story you've heard about sleep, how much you should get, what rituals work, how failing to rest means failing at life, these become scripts you replay nightly. The mind loves a familiar story, even when it hurts. And so, each night becomes a negotiation not with your own biology, but with a room full of ghosts. Parents, teachers, lovers, influencers, strangers whose advice you never asked for but absorbed anyway. You're not just persuading yourself. You're wrestling with everyone who ever told you what rest should look like. Tonight we begin by unraveling those invisible strings. We'll explore not just how others persuade us, but how we secretly persuade ourselves, often against our own best interests. This isn't about manifesting sleep or trying to fix you. It's about seeing the machinery behind your thoughts, the hidden levers that shape your struggle with rest. As you listen, let your mind wander. Notice the negotiations, the bargains, the small acts of persuasion that shape your night. There is no pressure to arrive anywhere. This is the slow unraveling of influence, one breath, one story, one silent agreement at a time. 2. The first lie. Sleep as an act of surrender, not willpower. There's a story you carry, a belief so ordinary, so quietly embedded, that you rarely stop to question it. It whispers, almost kindly, if you try a little harder, you'll fall asleep. It's the myth that effort leads to rest, that you can earn sleep by willpower alone, by sheer discipline or cleverness. Maybe you catch yourself counting sheep or promising yourself just 5 more minutes with your eyes closed, as if sleep were a negotiation table and you simply hadn't made the right offer yet. But the paradox sits there, stubborn and unmovable. The more you try to seize rest, the further it slips from your grasp. This confusion between surrender and willpower isn't just an individual struggle, it's a cultural script. reinforced every time you hear about morning routines or winning the night. Robert Cialdini's authority principle lives here. The world is crowded with sleep experts, voices that promise you rest if you just follow their formula. But have you noticed how following advice, when driven by anxiety, can make the process feel more mechanical, more pressured, less human? It's as if the rituals themselves become another form of resistance, another checklist to fail at, another hour lost to the logic of control. In the dim blue light of insomnia, you might even sense your body becoming an opponent. You bargain with yourself. You demand answers from your nervous system. The pillow is no longer a place to lay your head, but an interrogation chair, one more tool to extract compliance from a reluctant mind. Every failed attempt to relax becomes another piece of evidence in the case against yourself. But sleep is indifferent to your pleading. It cannot be persuaded by force, only by gentle invitation. There's a quiet rebellion in letting go, though it rarely feels like victory. Surrender, in this context, isn't defeat. It's the art of allowing thoughts to pass without collecting them, letting the body soften without command. It's what makes sleep unique among human pursuits. Losing is winning. The very act of chasing sleep guarantees its escape, while surrendering, even clumsily, even without hope, invites the possibility of rest to return on its own terms. There's something deeply human in the struggle. It's a mirror for how you approach uncertainty everywhere else. What other parts of your life are you trying to will into existence, only to find they thrive in the absence of pressure? The myth of willpower, in sleep and beyond, is a comforting lie, one that lets us pretend we're always in control. But in the soft darkness of the bedroom, authority loses its power and the mind is left alone with the only choice that matters: to invite rest or to chase it into the distance. 3. Micro-triggers, the hidden persuaders in your bedroom. If you listen closely to the darkness, you'll hear a language spoken in shadows, a silent chorus of micro-triggers shaping every moment you spend between waking and sleep. These are not the grand dramas of memory or the loud monologues of worry, but the small, nearly invisible agents that whisper to your unconscious mind. They wait in the corners of your room, a faint scent of last week's anxiety, a sliver of light that slips beneath the door, the hum of an old appliance that you barely notice until the silence grows thick. These subtle details operate like masterful persuaders. A sound, too faint to name, can hijack your nervous system, tightening your breath, summoning old fears. The brain, always scanning for threat or comfort, responds to cues far below the surface of awareness. Sometimes the trigger is visual. A stack of unread books by the bed, a phone screen's glow promising answers that only breed more questions. Sometimes it's tactile, the texture of sheets, a draft of cool air, the heaviness or lightness of your blanket. Each detail becomes a character in the nightly drama, quietly scripting your responses before you can resist. Paul Ekman spent decades studying the micro-expressions that betray our inner state. Tiny flashes of emotion across the face that last only a fraction of a second. Yet, as you lie awake, you might notice your own face betraying its effort. The clench of a jaw, the flutter of eyelids that refuse to close, the tension around your lips. Your body tells the truth even when you wish it would lie. These subtle signals, rarely seen but deeply felt, become a kind of feedback loop. Your body's reluctance confirming your mind's suspicion that rest is slipping away. And then there's the social contagion, silent but potent. Sleeping next to someone whose anxiety hums in the dark, or remembering how your parents reacted to their own sleeplessness. Even alone, you carry these emotional residues, as if the bedroom remembers every night you struggled. The room itself conspires sometimes against you. The background noises, traffic, a neighbor's footsteps, the slow ticking of a clock can anchor wakefulness, making the prospect of sleep seem distant, almost unreachable. In this landscape, Even your pillow can become a double agent. Some nights it cradles you, other nights it keeps score of your unrest, collecting the hours you've lost like debts to be repaid. These micro-triggers are not your fault, nor entirely under your control. They remind you that the path to rest is woven from details too small to master, too intricate to command. The art, perhaps, is not in banishing every disturbance, but in seeing them clearly, acknowledging the way the world seeps into the sanctuary of sleep and forgiving yourself for the ways you respond. In this way, every night is both a negotiation and an act of acceptance written in the smallest language imaginable. 4. Scarcity and the sleep clock. Why limited time ruins your night. The mind is never more obsessed with time than in the moments it should let time go. The clock on the nightstand becomes both sentinel and tormentor, marking out the hours with the cold precision of scarcity. There's only so much night, only so many chances left before morning demands your attention again. It's the scarcity principle, quietly at work in the darkness. Robert Cialdini's insight that what is limited feels urgent, precious, and therefore infinitely harder to surrender. In the hush of 2 a.m., time itself becomes a weapon, pressed against your temple by your own anxious thoughts. The tyranny of the alarm clock cannot be overstated. It promises structure, but it rarely delivers comfort. Each glance at its glowing face is a reminder of minutes slipping away, opportunities to rest diminishing. The more you measure what remains, the heavier each moment becomes. Sleep is transformed into a commodity, rationed and hunted, counted and mourned. You start to believe that if you don't sleep now, the day will be lost, and with it your sense of control. There is a paradox here. The countdown that was meant to create urgency only guarantees its opposite. The more acutely you are aware of time passing, the less able you are to fall into its gentle oblivion. The body resists being scheduled. Rest cannot be summoned on command. The scarcity mindset, so useful for productivity, backfires in the bedroom, where the logic of efficiency collapses. Every attempt to optimize your sleep only multiplies the frustration, like a gambler trying to recover lost bets with one more desperate wager. Some nights the urgency is so thick you can feel it on your skin. Each tick of the clock becomes a metronome for anxiety, orchestrating a symphony of worry that drowns out any hope of surrender. Yet the irony remains. The sand in your hourglass is watching you too. Time is not the adversary you imagine. It's a silent witness, indifferent to your struggle, unmoved by your pleas. It keeps moving, whether you rage against it or not. What would it mean to let time be? To turn the clock away, to allow night to stretch and contract as it will, without the desperate arithmetic of hours lost and gained. The scarcity of night is real, but the value of rest lies beyond calculation. The only way out of the trap is to stop counting altogether, to step out of the commerce of minutes and into the gentle uncertainty that allows sleep to arrive, not by demand, but by invitation. 5. Social proof and midnight rituals. Copycats in the dark. In the silent theater of night, most of what you do is less original than you believe. The mind is a collector of habits, a mimic by design, quietly borrowing rituals and scripts from those you've watched or loved. Even your most private attempts at rest are colored by echoes. How your parents turned off the lights, how lovers rearranged their pillows, how some expert on a glowing screen described the perfect bedtime routine. The script runs deep, inherited without consent. You may think you're choosing your way through the darkness, but much of what happens after midnight is choreography written by other hands. Robert Cialdini's principle of consensus, or social proof, is rarely more visible than when you're alone. You perform what you think is expected, even if no one is watching. There is comfort in repetition, in the illusion that if a ritual works for others, it might finally work for you. But beneath this comfort is a subtle unease. a sense that you're playing a role, reciting lines in a drama that has lost its meaning. You measure your sleep against invisible standards, haunted by the idea of the good sleeper, chasing a norm that may never have existed for you. Much of what you believe about sleep is cultural myth. The 8-hour rule, the idea that rest must be uninterrupted and flawless. The belief that anyone who struggles is somehow broken or failing. These are not laws of nature. They are social constructions built from generations of repetition. You find yourself in bed, repeating gestures that feel oddly familiar, smoothing the sheets just so, exhaling with practiced slowness, counting breaths as if following a script. Even your frustrations are not yours alone. They're hand-me-downs, shared with millions who have fought the same silent battle. And so, you are never truly alone in bed. The ghosts of expectations slip beneath the covers, whispering how things should be. They keep you company, even when you wish for solitude, reminding you of standards you never consciously chose. It's a strange kind of intimacy, this invisible audience, sometimes reassuring, more often oppressive. The rituals you repeat are proof, not of your failure, but of your humanity. To long for rest, to imitate others in the hope of comfort, is simply to belong to the messy lineage of sleepers everywhere. Sleep is not a private act. It's a communal story, retold in different rooms every night. Your struggle is shared, your rituals borrowed, your hope for peace a testament to the countless ways humans try to make sense of the dark. Perhaps that is enough for now. Not to perfect the script, but to recognize whose voices you carry and to soften in their company, just for tonight. 6. Reciprocity rewired, the unseen exchanges of sleep hygiene. There is a ledger hidden beneath your pillow, a silent accounting of what you owe yourself and what you believe you deserve. Sleep is often framed as a reward, a compensation for work well done or self-care properly performed. You follow routines and hygiene rituals, hoping that by doing things right, you'll earn the peace you crave. Robert Cialdini's principle of reciprocity is alive here. The sense that if you invest enough, give enough, you should get something back in return. The transaction is subtle, but its grip is strong. This emotional bookkeeping creates a guilt economy. When sleep doesn't come, you search for what you've done wrong. Maybe you worked too late, ate too much sugar, scrolled through your phone for 1 minute too long. Each infraction is tallied and used as evidence for why rest is withheld. Bedtime becomes a moral checkpoint, another test of discipline. Even acts of kindness toward yourself, gentle music, herbal tea, a favorite blanket, can feel like bribes, offered in hopes of securing the body's cooperation. But the rules of this exchange are unwritten, and the outcome is never guaranteed. Sometimes, the harder you try to deserve rest, the more elusive it becomes. Your brain keeps emotional ledgers that rarely balance. The more you bargain, the more you reinforce the idea that sleep must be earned, not received. This can mirror the dynamics of toxic relationships, cycles of giving and withholding, of hope and disappointment. Your bed becomes a stage for this endless negotiation. Some nights, you grant yourself permission to rest, and sleep arrives quietly, almost as an afterthought. Other nights, you withhold approval, insisting on one more ritual, one more condition met. The process is exhausting, the results unpredictable. Your bed, in its quiet wisdom, remembers every negotiation, each hope and disappointment, each promise and broken truce. Maybe it is time to rewire the contract. What if rest was not a transaction, but a birthright? What if you could receive sleep without first proving your worth, without paying in guilt or self-denial? The mind resists this idea, trained as it is to expect reciprocity in all things. Yet the deepest sleep comes when the ledger is abandoned, when giving and receiving dissolve into a simple act of being. For tonight, let the balance remain unsettled and see what arrives when you stop keeping score. 7. The liking effect, seducing yourself into calm. Most advice about sleep ignores the fundamental truth. You cannot rest in the company of someone you dislike, even when that someone is yourself. Robert Cialdini's principle of liking is as true inwardly as it is outwardly. Persuasion is easier when there is genuine affection, when the messenger is trusted. At night, your inner voice becomes your closest companion, and its tone can either soothe or agitate, invite peace or provoke resistance. Ask yourself, in the quiet moments before sleep, do you like the version of yourself you bring to bed? The critic, the worrier, the taskmaster, these inner voices may be well-intentioned, but they rarely inspire relaxation. Calm is not born of critique. Mirror neurons, those silent mimics in the brain, respond not just to others' emotions, but to the self's own posture and tone. If your mind greets you with harshness, the body tightens. If you approach yourself with warmth, even awkwardly, the body softens in response. Reframing self-talk is not a matter of false positivity or forced affirmation. It is the slow work of befriending your own mind, of becoming a co-conspirator rather than an adversary. What would it mean to treat yourself with the same patience you offer a friend, the same understanding you extend to a child afraid of the dark? Most people would not choose to date their own inner monologue, let alone let it tuck them in each night. Yet every night, you must face that voice, and it shapes your ability to surrender. Seduction into calm is an art, not a trick. It asks for honesty, for humor, for the willingness to let the conversation grow gentle. You do not have to love every thought that passes through your mind, but you might experiment with speaking to yourself as someone worthy of rest. In this way, the body learns a new language, the language of ease, the dialect of kindness. The night becomes less a battlefield, more a quiet conversation, unfolding softly until sleep chooses to join in. 8. Consistency and the prison of the perfect sleeper identity. The pressure to be consistent, to become a model of routine and discipline, is a quiet trap, especially for those who struggle with sleep. The mind clings to identity, and once you've named yourself an insomniac, the label shapes every expectation, every night's effort. Robert Cialdini's principle of consistency describes our need to act in line with past decisions and public statements. But this drive, which gives life its structure, can also become a prison. You might find yourself performing for an invisible judge, proving again and again that you fit the identity you've been assigned or have chosen for yourself. There's a comfort in the familiar, even when it hurts. Perfectionism creeps in, promising that if you just do everything right, rest will come. Every bedtime ritual is enacted with precision, every variable controlled. Yet the outcome is rarely what you hope. The pursuit of the perfect sleeper becomes another performance, another self-fulfilling prophecy that keeps you awake. Habits are powerful, but they are not destiny. Sometimes the most liberating act is a gentle disruption, a small intentional break in routine. Perhaps you sleep on the other side of the bed, leave a light on, allow yourself to drift without counting the hours. These small rebellions remind the mind that identity is fluid, not fixed. The body responds to novelty, sometimes finding rest where it is least expected. You are not your diagnosis, nor the sum of your sleepless nights. The pillow has no memory of last week's failures. It is indifferent to your reputation. The possibility of change remains, even when you've lived inside the same story for years. The prison of consistency can be unlocked, not with force, but with the willingness to be surprised by yourself, to let go of what no longer serves you. 9. The authority of technology, how screens gaslight your brain. There is a new authority in the bedroom, glowing with silent confidence. A phone, a tablet, a smartwatch. These devices have become our teachers, our advisors, our critics, and our false comforters. Technology promises connection and knowledge, but often delivers stimulation and distraction. Robert Cialdini's authority principle comes alive every time you defer to an app's advice over your body's own quiet signals. Screens reshape your relationship with rest. The dopamine surges of endless scrolling, the blue light that tells your brain it's still daytime, the alerts that pull you back from the edge of sleep. These are not accidents. They are part of a system designed for engagement, not for surrender. You may start the night intending to use technology as a tool, but it quickly claims authority, dictating when you should sleep, how deeply you rest, and what you should worry about next. The slow erosion of natural sleep signals is subtle. You trust the glowing rectangle more than your own fatigue, waiting for permission to rest from a device that profits from your wakefulness. There is a longing for control, for certainty, for the expert voice that tells you what to do. But the path back to rest is not a war with technology. It is a truce, an agreement to honor both your needs and your boundaries. You do not have to banish screens nor demonize them. Instead, you might create a ritual of parting, a deliberate, kind farewell to the day's stimulation. Technology is not your shepherd. It is a guest in your sanctuary. When you remember this, the mind begins to return to its ancient wisdom, the knowledge of darkness, the rhythm of sleep not yet colonized by the artificial pulse of machines. 10. Fear of missing out, FOMO, and the myth of the productive sleeper. The urge to be productive, to extract value from every waking moment, has infiltrated even the hours reserved for rest. The cult of efficiency whispers that sleep is only worthwhile if it makes you better, sharper, more successful. Fear of missing out, FOMO, transforms the quiet night into another opportunity to perform, another metric by which to measure your worth. The bed becomes a desk, the mind a restless auditor. If I sleep, I'll miss something important. The logic is flawed but persuasive. It keeps you tethered to your phone, to your plans, to the idea that somewhere, something more urgent is happening without you. Even sleep itself becomes a competition, a productivity hack to be optimized and shared. The very tools meant to soothe you become reminders of all you have yet to accomplish. There is a kind of rebellion in practicing digital absence, in refusing to document your rest or measure your dreams. To disappear from the endless scroll, even for a night, is a radical act. It breaks the spell of urgency, the notion that you must always be available, always engaged. Sometimes the most subversive choice is to do nothing, to let the world go on without your participation. The myth of the productive sleeper is seductive, but it is just that, a myth. The deepest rest comes not from performance, but from presence. To sleep is to surrender to the unknown, to release the need to be seen or measured. The night does not ask you to be useful. It asks only that you be here, now, in the soft darkness, breathing. 11. The dark side of mindfulness, when being present becomes a trap. Mindfulness, so often prescribed as a solution for insomnia, can sometimes become its own paradox. The effort to be present, to observe every sensation, can tip into hyper-awareness, a state where every twitch and flutter is scrutinized, where calm is chased like a moving target. Robert Cialdini's consistency principle reappears here in the quest to be the perfect meditator, always poised, always aware. There's a danger in turning mindfulness into another performance. When presence becomes a test, the mind divides itself, one part watching, the other part performing. The attempt to notice every detail becomes exhausting, each breath a marker of success or failure. In these moments, the gentle art of surrender is lost to the relentless pursuit of perfection. Sometimes the antidote is boredom, a willingness to let the mind wander, to allow thoughts to blur and fade without judgment. Mindfulness was never meant to be a spotlight, harsh and exposing. It was meant to be a nightlight, softening the edges of experience, making space for uncertainty. Rest is found not in control, but in the gentle acceptance of whatever arises. There is freedom in letting go of the need to be present, in allowing yourself to drift, to forget, to dissolve into the background noise of the night. Sleep arrives, not when you master your awareness, but when you relinquish the need to master anything at all. 12. Manipulation without witness. How you unknowingly gaslight yourself. Perhaps the most subtle form of persuasion is the kind you perform on yourself, alone, when no one is watching. Late at night, the mind is a skilled manipulator, spinning stories that justify sleeplessness, rewriting the script to suit its own resistance. You reason with yourself, offering justifications and excuses, convincing yourself that rest is impossible, undeserved, or always out of reach. These internalized scripts are not entirely yours. They are composites of every voice you've ever trusted. Parents, partners, experts, strangers on the internet. The inner committee meets in secret, debating your every move, offering conflicting advice that only heightens confusion. Robert Cialdini's principles of consensus and authority battle for dominance inside your mind, leaving you uncertain whom to trust. This is the quiet psychology of self-gaslighting, the art of persuading yourself that your struggle is unique, your failure personal, your rest forever conditional. The stories you tell become the reality you inhabit, shaping the contours of your night. Sometimes the enemy is not the world outside, but your own reflection in the window at 3 a.m. A familiar face repeating familiar doubts. Recognizing this pattern is not a call to blame yourself, but an invitation to compassion. You do not have to believe every thought that passes through your mind, nor obey every command from your internal committee. The path out begins with curiosity, with asking whose voice is speaking and whether it still serves you. Sleep, at its heart, is the absence of persuasion, the freedom to rest without argument or justification. 13. The freedom in uncertainty, learning to trust the unfinished night. Conclusion. There is a strange comfort in the unfinished night, in the recognition that not everything must be solved before morning comes. Sleep is not a conquest, not a prize to be claimed by force or cleverness. It is a shared secret with the darkness, a ritual older than any rule or technique. Robert Cialdini's principles remind us that influence is rarely about control. It is about trust, about the gentle invitation to let go of certainty, to accept what cannot be managed. Daniel Kahneman, master of the mind's contradictions, reminds us that we cannot outthink our way to rest. The tired brain resists persuasion. It longs for mercy, not mastery. The most practical strategy is also the most counterintuitive. Surrender the need to arrive and rest in the space between intention and outcome. Sleep, like all good things, arrives when it is least demanded, when you give yourself permission to not know what comes next. Tonight, as you listen to the slow unraveling of these stories, remember that the mind's machinery can be seen and softened, but never fully controlled. There will be nights of clarity and nights of confusion, moments of peace and moments of unrest. In each, there is the possibility of gentleness, the art of becoming your own good enough hypnotist, persuading yourself not with argument, but with presence. So, let uncertainty remain. Let the night be unfinished, the questions unresolved. Trust that rest, like life, is found not in answers, but in the willingness to linger in the dark. And if tonight is not the night, let it be another beginning, a space to practice the slow, beautiful art of letting go.